So this is chapter 4, and it's about the social structure and interaction in everyday life, as we have been doing, going through it through the slides chapter by chapter or through the concepts. So this is the an outline of the chapter. We're dealing with 5 items or 5 points. One is the social structure, and then we look at the components, and then we look at the idea of society. Finally, the social interaction. So the first social structure is looking at the macro perspective, and the last part of the chapter is looking at the micro perspective. And then I'll deal with some theories along the line. So what do we mean by social structure? Clearly, the key word in social structure is this idea of pattern. And so it's a pattern of social interaction. So it's between this and along that idea of social interaction is the social relation in terms of group and in terms of society. So 3 key concepts that you have to deal with when we're dealing with social structure. One is the idea of pattern, an organized pattern, the idea of social interaction, the idea of social relation, and this is always within a group and within a society. This is why it's the macro level of analysis. So that's this is the definition of social structure. So when we talk about social structure, we're talking about organized pattern of what? Of social interaction and social relation within a group or within the society at large. So there are 4 components to any social structure. One is the idea of the status, 2 the idea of roles, 3 the idea of groups, and finally the idea of social institutions. And I will deal with each one of them now. So what do we mean by status? Status is basically the key word in status is the idea of position. So it's a socially defined position. So being a man, being a woman, being a manager, being a president, being a prime minister, and so on and so forth. So this becomes a socially defined position, and this position has 3 things: expectations, rights, and duties. Expectations, right, and duties. And the status is defined in, or we have 2 types of status. One is ascribed status, and 2, achieved status. So ascribed status is basically things that you're born with: your race, your ethnicity, your age, your gender, and so on and so forth, okay? But however, the achieved status is the one that you achieve over time. So the fact that you are at the university and being a woman at the university is a status, and you have achieved that status through your hard work. And ultimately, this is known as the master status, which is the ultimate and the most important status a person can occupy. That can be anything from a manager of a place to a president of the place. So usually it's socially defined by other people, and it's socially defined by the society at large, basically. So the idea of the master status. So we have 2 types of status. One is ascribed, the second is achieved, and then we have the master status, which is the ultimate one. With the idea of status, there is something called status symbols. This is where the key word here is the idea of signs. So there are certain things that become a sign, a symbol for something else. So I gave you the example in earlier classes about the girl who has the watch that cost 35,000 dirhams. That's not, this is no longer just a watch, it's a status symbol. In other words, it's a symbol for her richness, for her status, for her wealth. So that's exactly what it is. So the small things, such as putting on a wedding, for example, a wedding ring, that becomes a status that you're married, and or anything else. So it's small things that would indicate something else. It gives a symbol to something else. The ring on the one hand, the watch on the other, your phone, and so on and so forth. How expensive they are, they become no longer just about the item in itself, but a sign or a symbol for something else. So now we covered the first, basically, if you go back to the first component of social structure, so the idea of status. Now let's look at the idea of roles. What are the roles that comes with social structure? Two things. There is role expectation versus role performance. So role expectations is the things that are expected in the particular role. So the prime minister, a student, professor, and so on, there are certain expectations that come with those roles, versus role performance, which is what you actually do. So there is, and the expectations can be a written one. So the kind of the professors, for example, they have certain expectations, and those are written in their guidelines or in their job descriptions and all of that. But what they actually do is the role performance. So that's a really, really crucial thing for us to know. So the key things that I wanted you to take away from here is this: the idea of role has role expectation versus role performance, and this will actually become more clear in the next slide. But let's look at the idea of role conflict versus role restraint. Role conflict is, and this is really the key word that I wanted you to highlight, is, let's read it first. Occurs when incompatible demands are placed on a person by two or more statuses that held at the same time. So the idea of really what is the role conflict is when you have competing demands. So competing demands here within the same person who has two roles or more, or two statuses or more. So the fact that you are a woman and a professor, for example, those are two statuses, woman and a professor. So there are two, they might be competing, and you might find yourself in conflict because of those two statuses. A role restraint is the competing demand within the status itself. So the fact that you're a woman, for example, with being a woman in itself is a status, right? So within that status, you can have competing roles or competing demands. So that creates role strain. Let's look concretely. Let me give you a visual image of what that might look like. So so we have the woman in the middle, okay? So her status is a professor, and that means she can be a teacher and she can be a colleague as well. And at the same time she's a mother, and at the same time she's a researcher, and she's also a wife. The role, let's go back a little bit. The role conflict, so she is the same person, so one person, but has two statuses, being a professor and a mother. So that creates role conflict. Whereas within motherhood itself, she can be a maternal role and a civic role, that creates role strain. Okay, I hope this is clear. So the fact that she's the same person but has different statuses, okay, and different roles. If you this is why these are all roles. So being author, being lab, being domestic teacher, and so on and so forth. Now we want to look at, let's go back a little bit, and you remember that these are all the different components of the social structure. So we have the status, we have the roles. Now let's look at the groups, the idea of social groups. In any social group, you have to have at minimum at least 2 or more people. So there is no group of one person. A group has to have at least 2 or more people who meet frequently, interact frequently, and they share the same identity or feeling of interdependence. That is, they have something in common. So 2 or more people interact regularly and having something in common. And we will have two types of group. One is the primary group, which is the immediate. Let's just call it the immediate family. People that you have very close and intimate relationship with. And the secondary are the things that have a larger impact, such as church, schools, mosques, and so on and so forth. So social group, for the definition of a social group, it has to have 2 or more people, interact regularly, and they share common interest or common identity. We have primary and we have a secondary group. This is more of a formal organization. What do we mean by formal organization? This is all part of the social structure. The formal organization basically is a highly structured group formed for the purpose of completing certain tasks or achieving specific goals. So a highly structured. So it's a structured group of people who are there to do something. They have a job and they need to do. Okay. So let's think about the university. The university is a formal organization. That is, it has it has a pyramid structure. It's a very structured organization. So it has the president, the vice presidents, and then it has the deans, and then it has the department chairs, and then it has the professors, and then it has students, and so on and so forth. Each one of them knows exactly what is expected of him or her. This is why it's called a formal organization, precisely because it's a group of people and they are there to do a task. That's all I wanted you to take away from this definition here. The last part of social structure is social institutions. So we now dealt with 4 things, and this is the last part of the social structure. That is the social institution. It's interesting that social institution is organized around, and this is the key word that I want you to take away, the idea of rules. And these rules are established to meet certain basic needs. So it's a belief or rules that are established to meet certain societal need, okay? And those rules, they create roles. So the really crucial words that I want you to highlight are, so the idea of organized beliefs and rules, and these rules are there to meet a certain societal needs, And these rules and beliefs, they create roles.